Guys, you have to agree with me when I say that there are a lot of JRPG franchises, JRPG series that are dead and that they need to be resurrected. You agree with me, I know that. It's so sad because most of these series are extremely wonderful. Most of these series are my favorite series of all time. And why are they dead? Well, we're gonna find out in this video. So, let's have a look at the 10 series that, in my opinion, need to be resurrected. Top 10 JRPG series that need to be resurrected. Number 10, Baten Kaitos. There are 2 titles only, and for the GameCube: Eternal Wings and the Lost Ocean and Origins. The Baten Kaitos series were developed by Monolith Soft and 3 Crescendo, distributed by Namco in 2004 and 2005 respectively. These 2 are wonderful turn-based RPGs in which the characters use cards to battle their enemies. The first game was a critical success, but due to being a little overshadowed by many different titles for the PS2 and also for the GameCube, not too many people became familiar with it. The second, however, was one of the last JRPGs to be made for the GameCube, and the development team obviously felt the pressure for the new system, the Wii, in which Origins was believed to be released. However, the developers had already almost the entire game materialized for the GameCube and decided not to release it for the Wii. This game is supposed to be a prequel to the first title and was as good as it, but with several problems that turned down a lot of players when it came out, including slight changes in the card deck system and the difficulty shooting up and down during certain boss battles. Monolith Soft has never explained why they haven't released a new title, and they refuse to admit that the series is dead. But almost 12 years have passed since the last entry and, well, the future just seems blank. Number 9, LUNAR. The LUNAR series are developed by Game Arts, the same people who made Grandia and Alicia Dragoon and Project Sylphid. The first 2 titles were originally released for the Mega CD, also known as the Sega CD in North America, in 1992 and 1994 respectively. Then they were ported to the Sega Saturn, but only in Japan. Finally, we got the two versions everyone knows that were ported to the PlayStation 1 in 1998 and 9. The first title was later ported also for the PSP in 2009. Man, a lot of ports. This was a very lovable series, turn-based RPGs that are still considered to be nowadays 2 for the best for the PS1. Nonetheless, the series met its failure after a few spin-offs that only came out in Japan and the critically panned Lunar Dragon song for the Nintendo DS, which, the way I see it, killed the franchise. Ever since the PS1 versions came out, rumor after rumor were proven false with the development for the LUNAR 3, but almost 20 years have passed since all that, and we still haven't got a new LUNAR game. So sad. Number 8, LUFIA. The LUFIA series was developed by Neverland, except for the Game Boy Advance title, which was developed by a strange and unknown company called Atelier Double. The first 2 titles, which everybody are familiar with, were released for the Super Nintendo in 1993 and 1995. Both were pretty well received by the critics and are nowadays still considered to be 2 of the greatest JRPGs for the Super Nintendo. The first one was okay, but with a few flaws that were later fixed for the masterpiece that is LUFIA 2. Then came the third entry in the series in 2001 for the Game Boy Color, which is a sequel to the second one, and finally the 4th installment for the Game Boy Advance. Both are decent games, but not as good as the Super Nintendo classics. At the end, LUFIA 2 was remade for the Nintendo DS, but they changed a lot of things and turned it into an action RPG. Now, I don't think I need to explain why this series is dead. Whenever a TV console series releases main games for the portable consoles, at least most of the time, they fail. And to remake a wonderful game, reimagining it completely, in my opinion, takes the cake. It may not fail for other series, but for LUFIA it was literally its own fortress of doom. Number 7, Wild Arms. Wild Arms was a very cool series for the Sony PlayStation developed by Media Vision. All of them are influenced by the classic Western stories since the launch of the first Wild Arms in 1996 for the PS1, all taking place in a fictional continent called VALKYRIE. The second title, much better than the previous one in my opinion, was also released for the PS1 in 2000. Then came Wild Arms 3, also for the PS2, and some years later came two following titles for the same console, 4, which was mediocre at best, and 5, which was awesome. Actually, the first title was remade for the PS2, now called Alter Code F, which is one of the most rare and expensive JRPGs for that console. Now, my personal favorites are 2 and 5, but not a single game of the series was critically acclaimed. They were all considered to be great games, very unique, and cult following. However, with the critical failure that was Wild Arms XF for the PSP, in which they changed the turn-based battle system for the strategy one, the series met its demise. This is another series which the developers have never explained why it is dead or if they will one day revive it, but considering the fact that the series has a solid fanbase in the entire world, maybe we shouldn't lose hope. Number 6. Grandia. Game Arts, the same people that made the LUNAR series, are also responsible for Grandia. Now there's 2 dead series in their library. First, there was Grandia for the Sega Saturn in 1997, but it didn't leave Japan until its port for the PS1 in 1999. Next was Grandia 2 for the Dreamcast in 2000, later ported to the PS2 in 2002. Then we got a spin-off called Grandia Extreme, also for the PS2 in 2002, and finally Grandia 3, my favorite, in 2006. There were other spin-offs and even an MMORPG called Grandia Online that ran from 2009 to 2012, but only in Japan. You see, that's the problem with most RPG franchises that die, only in Japan. Aren't we all tired of that? But the video game industry is also a business, and not a simple one, mind you. It's full of complex and intricate marketing situations that are often left out in the shadows. Therefore, most people never really find out why such a great series died or hasn't seen the light nowadays with a new title. And even though Grandia 2 for the PS2 had a lot of problems and Grandia Extreme wasn't that good, Grandia 3 was met with positive reviews. But not really. And nope, that's not the reason it failed. You will be surprised to know that the real reason Grandia died is because the creator is also dead. Shadow Hearts. 3 titles came out for the PS2. The first one, Covenant End, the second one, From the New World. The Shadow Hearts series actually started with Koudelka, a strategy RPG with survival horror elements that came out for the PS1 in 2000. It received mixed criticism, but there were lots of elements that were good enough to spawn a new series, and that was Shadow Hearts. Turn-based combat RPGs with a very original ring system in which you have to click on the hit areas in order to make your attacks work properly. The first 2 games, made in 2001 and 2004, were truly great and received very positive reviews. Both are based before and during the First World War, which makes them all the way more interesting. However, the third installment in the series and what actually killed the franchise was the commercial failure called Shadow Hearts from the New World in 2005. It is considered to be a spin-off despite being around 15 years after the events of the previous games. And boy was it panned by the critics. I enjoyed the game and beat it, but it did leave me with a cut of dissatisfaction, like to never even play it again. In any case, that's not the only reason the series died, and no, it's not also because of the huge fan service it had, as you can see right now. I'm only kidding. Nope, in 2009, Nautilus, the development company, disbanded, and considering many of its key members left pretty angry, explains why Shadow Hearts died. Number 4. Valkyrie Profile. There's 1 for the PlayStation 1, which is one of the most expensive JRPGs for that console, 2 for the PlayStation 2, and finally a spin-off called Covenant of the Plume for the Nintendo DS. Triace developed this wonderful series back in 1999, starting with a very powerful story, great characters and gameplay for the PS1, and an astonishingly good sequel for the PS2. Then came the Nintendo DS version, and I already talked about how bad it is as an idea to continue a saga in portable systems. However, the third installment in the series, Covenant of the Plune, is considered to be a spin-off and not part of the main series. Considering that Valkyrie Profile 2 Silmeria for the PS2 came out in 2006, and we haven't seen a third part yet in almost 12 years, what the hell happened? I will never understand why Tri-Ace made the stupid decision to abandon this series, only to focus on another spin-off for Android that hasn't even left Japan since last year. First of all, Covenant of the Plune had mixed reviews. Many people, including me, loved the story and the characters, but complained about the difficulty being unreasonable and unfair at times. Despite that, it was a very good spin-off, but we kept waiting and waiting for a new title for a console system. And even though the first game was ported to the PSP with additional features, Tri-Ace still made us wait. The problem is that they have made quite a few other games like Star Ocean, but none of their last entries have been critically praised. Despite that, they released a new Star Ocean last year, so maybe one day we'll get a new Valkyrie profile? I'll guess we should have to wait. Number 3, CHRONO. Everybody, and I mean everybody, has been begging Square for a new entry in this series. Chrono Trigger for the Super Nintendo came out in 1995, later ported to the PS1 in 1999 and for the Nintendo DS in 2008. It is considered to be one of the greatest JRPGs of all time, or the greatest by a lot of people. Then came one of the stupidest ideas the team has ever made. Radical Dreamers, only in Japan, for something called the Satellaview, an add-on for the Super Famicom. Why the hell, after the critical success of Chrono Trigger, will they release their next title only in Japan and for a damn add-on? Like seriously, why do they do that? Anyway, finally, after a couple of years, we got my favorite JRPG of all time, Chrono Cross, a spiritual sequel for the PS1 in 1999. So here's a team with 2 masterpieces, critically acclaimed and with a gigantic fanbase waiting for the true third game in the series. But did you know that the people who made Trigger did not make Cross? 2 different teams within Squaresoft, yep, now Square Enix, produced 2 of the greatest JRPGs of all time. Do you think that's the reason the series is dead? Because they can't decide which team is going to make which game? Maybe the fear of making something that will never surpass Chrono Trigger is what's really keeping them away from a new game. Because Chrono Cross, even though it's amazing, didn't keep up with Trigger. In any case, I don't want to be negative, but it seems like it will never be a new Chrono game again. Number 2, GROWLANSER. One of the series that was very successful in Japan was GROWLANSER, developed by CareerSoft. Seeing that the first title in the series made for the PS1 but only in their country was a very well received game, they made 2 spiritual sequels for the PS2. 2 games that didn't leave Japan until Working Designs produced GROWLANSER Generations in 2004, which includes those 2 titles called The Sense of Justice and The Dual Darkness. Great games. This Generations pack was well received, so they brought a new GROWLANSER called Wayfarer of Time, but for the PSP. This is a different case, however, from what I've spoken of before, since it was a commercial success and it is considered to be one of the greatest JRPGs for the PSP. Then came GROWLANSER 5, Heritage of War, my favorite actually, returning to the PS2. And I am sad to say that even though it met positive reviews, and I still consider it to be far greater than all the previous titles, it didn't live up to its name outside Japan. The franchise was hurt because of it, and the next entry in the series, Precarious World, never left Japan. So why is this series dead? Because it was never that well received in the first place. Number 1, Suikoden. Look at this terrible cover. Look at it! This is the manual, and that should have been the cover. Anyway, finally we arrive at number 1, and at my favorite JRPG series of all time, which began in 1996. This will surprise you deeply. In Japan, it is considered to be one of the greatest JRPG franchises along with Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. It spanned 5 titles for the main series and 7 spin-offs, all of them loosely based on the classic Chinese novel By the River, or called Water Margin, revolving around war conflicts between several nations and centered around a character that reunites 108 characters to build up an army and fight them. 3 different battle systems on each title of the main series, turn-based combat, strategy sometimes as in real-time strategy, and duels. These are amazing JRPGs and I totally recommend them. So why is this series dead? It is the simplest reason out of the other 10 I've mentioned on this list. The development team had a huge fight, never reconciled their differences, and disbanded. Some attempts to revive the series were made for Suikoden Tear Cries on the Nintendo DS, but almost none of the key members of the team was involved, and even though it met positive reviews, the game disappointed almost everyone in the entire world. Then came the PSP title, but it never left Japan for obvious reasons. The first 2 Suikoden titles, especially the second one, were critically acclaimed. The third title was well received, but it was met with some criticism. The fourth title was good, but not enough to compare with the previous ones, and people were very disappointed. However, Suikoden 5 was another huge success, but people were already down with the series. I've already told you what happened during the following years, so that there will never be a new Suikoden title again. So sad. Anyway guys, thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends. And see you next time.